أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين. I hope and pray that Bashar will make it here, but I'm not sure he will. He's supposed to be on his way from Nashville, and he asked me to fill in case he didn't make it. So inshallah, I will try to have a kind of an informal session with you, and we'll continue the way he's been doing it, more or less, and we will continue from where he finished last time. Who knows? Anyhow, so inshallah we'll go and I mean today's hadith or today's session is very interesting, and I subhanallah how things happen, because we will there are many books about Seerah. There are a lot of books, and they look at Seerah from a different aspect. And by the way, this is the same book that Bashar is reading from, and that has a very nice analysis and so on. But there are some other books that are, the title of it, one of them is Fiqh as-Seerah. So and what they do is they take a Seerah event, something that happened in the life of the Prophet ﷺ, and they will come up with the fiqh lessons, the practical applications on our life that we can derive from that particular event. So here we will see a lot of practical applications from what the Prophet ﷺ did. What we will be talking about today is what is known in the Seerah books as Umrah al-Qada. Now, as you remember, the Prophet ﷺ, when he went to Mecca the first time before Sulh al-Hudaybiyah, he went with the intention to do Umrah, and they won't let him. So the agreement was that he will go there back to Al-Madinah that year, and they will come back the following year for Umrah. And based on that, this is why this Umrah is called Umrah al-Qada, meaning it is the Umrah that is in a place of what he intended to do before. You know, Qada, when you say Qada, is like when you did not, let's say, fast because you were sick and then you fast later on. This is Qada. So you did expiate or make up. Qada will be making up for something. So the Prophet ﷺ with a group of Muslims left, and they went to Mecca, and that would be in the Qa'dah of the 7th year of Hijrah. There are many events that sometimes there is differences in when they took place, but there are some major events that most of the, if not all the narrators will agree on. And this particular event, there is a universal agreement on its time. Maybe there was one or two that they will say it is a few months before or a few months after, but by most account it was in the month of the Qa'dah of the 7th year of Hijrah, and it was fulfilling the commitment that the Prophet ﷺ did with the Sulh al-Hudaybiyah. So here, the first lesson we learn is that the Prophet ﷺ had a contract, had a treaty with a kafir, and he is living up to the condition of the treaty. Now, this is so much different from, for example, the Jews. For example, the Jews in general will not honor a treaty that is established between them and non-Jews, because in their mind that this obligation to fulfill a commitment is only if it is with the Jews, but if it is a non-Jew, then they don't have to do it. And many others, I mean, there are many people, they might tell you something, but if you are not of their kind, then they will not live up to the expectations, what is expected of them. Not the Prophet ﷺ, and that is teaching us a very high degree of ethical behavior. That even, I mean, he didn't have to do it that way. You see, he could have come back and either at a different time, in a different way, or a different shape, but he didn't. He went back and he entered Mecca, but before he entered Mecca, they took all their heavy arms and they put it in a small valley on the outskirts of Mecca. I kept thinking, what would be a heavy arms? I mean, if at that time, Allahu A'lam, maybe some they have what is known as minjaniq, you know what that is. They put a huge stone on something and put it down, and catapult, exactly. Maybe some big, whatever it is, but they put the big stuff, the heavy stuff, in a little valley on the outskirts of Mecca, and they entered Mecca on their horses with weapons that they can hold it with their hands, basically their daggers if they have one, or their swords. And the total number of people who was with him, excluding children and women, was about 2,000. That's it, about 2,000 men, and then some women and children who went with him to Mecca. As he entered Mecca, there are narrators who say that one of his companions by the name of Abdullah ibn Rawaha, radiallahu anhu, who was known for saying poetry, that he went in front of him and he said several lines of poetry that is supposed to kind of show the pride of the Muslims and at the same time insult the kuffar. And I will try my best to translate them to you here, and it goes something like this: clear the way, you children of kuffar, clear the way for the Prophet, because today we will beat you based on what was revealed to him, and we will beat you enough that your heads will go on flying, and will beat you in such a way that a lover will be pushed away from his loved one. Again, it is a kind of, when you read it in Arabic, just like any other poetry, it will sound better, but I guess you got the idea. Now, the thing is, before that, there was a lot of rumors and talk about the health condition of the Muslim. Now, to kind of give you a little bit of a environmental background, the people of Mecca are living in a very arid land. They don't have any agriculture to speak of there, and they don't have any animal life to speak of except the horses they ride and the camels they ride. But the herds are usually left outside Mecca, and their homes, they don't have any exposure to any of the elements that the people of Medina have to. So in Medina, it's a different ball game. It's more humid, and you have pastures, and you have groves, and you have places where you have gardens and orchards, etc., etc. So there is more density there, and there is more chances for people to catch some communicable diseases. So the people of Mecca will always make fun of people of Medina, that it is very easy to get sick if you go to Medina. And besides, if you are living in Mecca and you go to the Medina, there is a change in the environment, and it is to adjust. It is easy for a person to get sick, and even now it happens. I mean, we call it jet lag. I mean, nowadays, if you move from one place to the other, it takes some adjustment to the air, to the whatever is circulating, to the organism, the germs, and so on. So they used to say about them, and indeed at the beginning of the Hijrah, many of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ fell ill, and I'm sure that Bashar talked about that. But the Prophet ﷺ was aware of this, so he told his companion, he said, when you get to Al-Kaaba, to show, because what happened when they heard that they're coming, according to the agreement, the Quraysh and everybody who is in Mecca, they left. They did not want anything to do with the Muslims, with the Prophet. I mean, they still have this tremendous hatred and tremendous feeling of despise toward the Muslims and toward the Prophet ﷺ. So they emptied Mecca, and they went to the outskirts of Mecca, and they watched them from, those of you did go to Mecca, right? You did Hajj. You remember, you didn't do Hajj yet? But you did. You remember how it looks, that the Kaaba is in a valley, and then you on the outskirts you can see. So they will go out on the little hills on the outskirts and they will watch as the Muslims entered Al-Haram and they did their tawaf. So the Prophet ﷺ told them, he said, when you enter Al-Haram, you do your tawaf, the first 3 rotations, you do it running. And then you do it normally, the last 4. And then after you finish, when you go to do a sa'i between As-Safa and Al-Marwa, you do it running. So if you remember, people between As-Safa and Al-Marwa now, they do it running. And they say this is Sunnah. And 90% of them, they don't know where that Sunnah came from. This is where it came from. He wanted them to do it this way, so to show the Quraysh and the people of Mecca that they are not sick, as they claim, and they are not ill, and they're still strong, and they can, after all that travel, they can run around, and they are not affected by what is known as the fever of Yathrib. So the Prophet ﷺ did this, and he ordered them to do it. In the first 3 rounds of tawaf, they did it, it is more of a jogging pace type of thing. And they did the sa'i between Safa and Marwa also in a jogging way. So al-mushrik will say and realize their strength. And indeed, when they did it, Quraysh standing or sitting way up on the top of the mountains and looking down on them, they saw them do this and they were extremely impressed, and they started talking to how strong they are and that they were really not affected by the fever of Yathrib. And they started yelling at each other and accusing each, because how come you told me they're weak? How come you told me? Look at them, how a weak person will not go and run like this. When they finished, when the Prophet ﷺ did his, and it is described in some other books in detail, what kind of ritual did he do. I will not go through it today for doing his Umrah. Then he ordered, now remember, they left their heavy weapons in a valley in the outskirts of Mecca. So meaning, and he left some people guarding those weapons. So he selected a group of the people who were with him, ordered them to go and guard the weapons and let the other companion come and do the manasik of Umrah, the rituals of Umrah. And they did. And after they finished, all of them, everybody who came with the Prophet ﷺ, finished their Umrah, the Prophet ﷺ entered Al-Kaaba itself. He went into Al-Kaaba. Now there is other event where he will enter Al-Kaaba, and that would be at the time of conquering Mecca. And there is a description of what is in Al-Kaaba. When they tell about this event, most of the narrators, they don't describe. But it seems that there were some paintings or some drawings that seem to depict Ibrahim alayhi salam, some paintings that depict Ismail alayhi salam, and several statues, little statuettes, if you will, of several gods. But of course, the Prophet ﷺ, as much as he wanted to, he did not touch all these things, because again, he is a guest, he is a visitor, there is a treaty, he has to live to the condition of those treaty. And he stayed in Al-Kaaba from like when they finished the Umrah early in the morning, and he stayed there until Dhuhr time. And then he did something that to me is the peak of the whole story. He ordered Bilal, of all the people, now remember who Bilal is. Bilal is a slave, the son of a slave, who was so much tortured by the icons of Mecca, and who always was looked down, that because he was a black person, and by the way, there was a lot of people who had their origin from either Yemen or from Al-Habasha and came and lived in Mecca, and they had a distinct black color to them. He ordered Bilal to climb on the roof of Al-Kaaba and to give adhan. So here this all Quraysh with all their chiefs, with all their big people, racist and people, and they are watching, and they can't do anything about it because, again, there is a treaty. And the Prophet, in those 3 days where he is supposed to stay in Mecca, he can do what he pleases, of course, within the limitations of the treaty. And the people of Mecca, again, what kind of hate is this? That for 3 days they will not come back to Mecca. They were always outside. They lived in their tents. They did their eating and drinking and whatever in those, and they will not come back to Mecca while the Prophet ﷺ was there. So he ordered Bilal, and Bilal climbed on the roof of Al-Kaaba and he gave adhan. When the 3 days finished, they don't want even to talk to him, to the Prophet. The leaders of Mecca and the leaders of Quraysh, they don't have anything to do with the Prophet ﷺ. So I don't get upset when Jerry Falwell calls him a terrorist. I don't get upset when other lowland people call him whatever, because he went through more than this by other people. They came down on the morning of the 4th day, and they looked for Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu. And they told Ali, go ahead and tell your friend, قل لصاحبك, tell your friend that your days are up and we don't want anything to do with you. Pick up your stuff and get out of here. Leave. So the Prophet ﷺ left, and he went again on the outskirts of Mecca, and he waited there for a few hours until everybody was there who came with him from Al-Medina. And he went back to Al-Medina in the month of Dhul Hijjah. So you would expect that the trip and the Umrah and all that took probably about a month or so, maybe less. Several things happened during this, and we will go through them. One of them is now one of the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, her name is Maimunah. And Maimunah is the sister of the wife of his uncle Al-Abbas, who is also the mother of Ibn Abbas. We talk many times about Abdullah ibn Abbas. So Abdullah ibn Abbas' mother is the sister of Maimunah. And so that's why we hear many. Now Abdullah ibn Abbas was a young boy when the Prophet ﷺ went to Al-Medina for Hijrah. Abdullah he wasn't very old. He was probably in his early teens or even late 9 or something like that. But if you remember, there is a famous story about, now see how the tradition of the Prophet is transmitted to us. Now if I happen to be praying here, and one of you come while I'm praying, where would you stand? You will stand one step behind and to my right. How do we know that? We know it from a hadith by Ibn Abbas. And the hadith is that one time he was visiting with the Prophet ﷺ, and he was visiting in the house of Maimunah. Why? His aunt. Because he is young and this is his aunt. And he described during that visit that he heard the Prophet ﷺ waking up at night, Salat al-Tahajjud. So then we know that the Prophet used to get up. See how the information will come to us. He said that the Prophet ﷺ went up fi jawf al-layl, meaning in the core of the night, the other half of the night. Alaykum salam. And he did wudu. Ibn Abbas described he did wudu, and after he did wudu, he started praying. He said, when I saw him do this, then I did the same. I got up and I did wudu, and I went and I stood to his left. And so the Prophet ﷺ took me with his hand, and he brought me from his left side to his right side. And after the prayer was finished, he told him that when you pray, you stand to the right. And so he was with Maimunah. This Maimunah is the sister of al-Fadl, that's the name it's known for, who is the mother of Ibn Abbas. The Prophet ﷺ married Maimunah during that time. After he finished al-ihram for Umrah, he got married. There are some different narrations. Some people say that he did the nikah during al-Umrah, but he did not have consummate the actual marriage until he finished. Allahu A'lam, we know that if you are not supposed to get married during ihram, whether it is Hajj or Umrah, but as I said, there is some differences, and the writer of this book said that after reviewing many sources, it seems that it is more likely that the marriage, the entire marriage, was done after the Umrah was finished and after the Rasul finished his ihram. This al-Mu'mineen Maimunah radiallahu anha was married to another person before. She was not a virgin. There is, as we know, there is only one virgin that the Prophet ﷺ married to, and that is Aisha radiallahu anha, who is the daughter of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. Who? No, Maimunah was fair, relatively speaking. So, I mean, she was probably at that time, I would say, in her late 40s, early 50s. And Maimunah, for those of you who are interested, it's not here, but she was a very pious person, and she did a lot of helping, social work type of thing, and helping the needy. She and Zainab, also the other wife of the Prophet ﷺ, Zainab bint Jahsh, both of them, they did a lot of helping and a lot of caring for the needy and a lot of social activities around the Prophet ﷺ. But she was not young, if that's the woman, the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, who were fairly young when he married them, would be Safiya is one, and radiallahu anha, and Juwayriyah bint Al-Harith is another one who was fairly young. Of course, Aisha was young, and there is Zainab bin Jahsh also, who will be his aunt's daughter. Also, she was fairly young, and I mean young, they were either in their late teens or early 20s. But Maimunah was, as you said, was a little bit on the older side. Now, as they were leaving Mecca, he was followed by a young child, a girl, who started yelling and calling, "Uncle, uncle." And this child is the child of Hamza ibn Abdul Muttalib radiallahu anhu. When Hamza left Mecca, he did not take anybody with him. And so his wife was left behind, and his child, who is this girl. Now, this is a year 7 of Hijrah, so you're talking about this girl being somewhere in her early teens, 11, 12, something like that. So she followed the Prophet ﷺ, and she started calling him because she wanted to go with them. She wanted to leave with them. And while she is doing this, Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu, he picked her up and he gave her to Fatima, his wife, and to take care of her. Now, Ali, how many wives did he have at that time? One. During the life of the Prophet ﷺ and the life of Fatima radiallahu anha, he did not marry. But he made the difference later. After Fatima died, he did marry quite few. I mean, he will marry. And his son Al-Hasan, now Al-Hussein was not like this, but Al-Hasan was known as, in Arabic, as Mizwaj Mitlaq. He married large number of people, and he will divorce them, and he married. So, subhanallah, it was not an unusual thing at that time. So he gave her to Fatima, and we know that Fatima is his cousin. So they fought for her. 3 men, each one of them wanted to take care of that child because of their love for Hamza rahimahullah. Hamza was dead, and they wanted to show their gratitude and appreciation and love by taking care of his child. And those 3 people are Ali ibn Abi Talib and his brother Ja'far and Zayd ibn Haritha. Now, Zayd ibn Haritha, as we know, is the son is the one that used to be the slave of the Prophet ﷺ, and he was given to him as a gift from Khadija radiallahu anha before he became Muslim. Before the revelation as a gift, Khadija radiallahu anha gave the Prophet ﷺ Zayd ibn Haritha as a gift, and the Prophet freed him, and he gave him the choice of either staying with him or going back to his family, and Zayd decided to stay with him. So people started calling him the son of Muhammad, and that continued until the Islam came, and then the revelation came that in Islam you cannot have adoption, and that Muhammad was not the father of any of their men. So they quit calling him the son of Muhammad. To re-emphasize that point, Zayd ibn Haritha, who is previous slave, got married to Zainab bin Jahash, who is one of the masters of Quraysh. She is, as I said, she is the granddaughter of Abdul Muttalib. But their marriage, and she would be the cousin of the Prophet ﷺ, their marriage did not work because she was, it looks like she was a very hard woman to please, and he felt inadequate, so they were fighting all the time. And he will come to the Prophet ﷺ and ask him to release him from this marriage, and the Prophet will refuse until the revelation came that he should break that marriage, and after the appropriate adda, then the Prophet ﷺ should marry marry Zainab, and he did, which means if he was truly his son, he would not be able to do this. And so it was putting the legal ruling in a very solid writing. And again, a side note, as a result of this, the only one who used to be able to stand up to Aisha radiallahu anha was Zainab bin Jahash, because she will tell Aisha, tell them, all of you were married by your fathers, given to the Prophet, except me, I was given to him by Allah. And she was a very proud lady. There is an interesting story, again, we'll digress a little bit, just kind of to add some flavor to the events, that the people in Medina, they knew how much the Prophet ﷺ loved Aisha. So if somebody wanted to give him a gift, they will wait until it is his day with Aisha, and they will take the gift there. Well, the other wives of the Prophet started complaining and saying, come on, why, don't do this. And they wanted to tell the Prophet about it, but none of them had the power to tell them. Finally, they decided to go to one of the most respected women among them, and that is Salama radiallahu anha, and ask her to talk to the Prophet. Well, Salama came and she mentioned this to the Prophet, and the Prophet did not like it. He said, look, I can't help it, I love the woman, don't say bad things about Aisha. And he kind of just shut off the subject. Well, then again they went, to Zainab to talk about the subject. So as Zainab is sitting, and the Prophet ﷺ and Aisha radiallahu anhuma sitting there, and Zainab started talking. It looks like Aisha said few things that Zainab didn't like, and Zainab said few things that Aisha didn't like, so there was an argument between the two of them, and the Prophet was sitting down watching, and he didn't interfere. He just let them kind of get at it, both of them. But that's the story. Those three people, Ali and Zayd and Ja'far, started arguing, I want to have it, I want to have this girl, and I want to talk, I want to take care of her. So the Ali's argument was that I'm the one who caught her, I was leaving, and she was yelling, uncle, uncle, and I was the one who grabbed her, put her with me on the horse, and besides she is my cousin, or she is his true cousin. Hamza is his uncle, and she will be his cousin. And but Ja'far said, no, so what? I am her cousin too, because Ja'far is Ali's brother, Ja'far ibn Abi Talib. He said, she is my cousin too, just like he is, but in addition to this, my wife is her aunt. So I have an advantage. Of course, Zayd just wanted to be a good person and take care of her. And the Prophet Zayd said that she is she is the daughter of my brother, because he considers Hamza of being his brother. And the Prophet ﷺ, who do you think he will give her to? Let's see how the wisdom. Now Ali is the one who called the girl. She came after him and she said, uncle, uncle, and he called her. And so he is her cousin, and Fatima is also her cousin. Zayd ibn Haritha is the brother. There was brotherhood between him and Hamza, and he wanted to show his devotion, and he wanted to raise the girl. Ja'far is her uncle, her cousin, and his wife is her aunt. So who would she go to? That's true. That's good. I mean, why do you say that?
Because one, Ali is his cousin and also his son-in-law, and Zayd was his adopted son. So knowing Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he would not allow any form of favoritism or nepotism. That's my rationale.
Okay. Who has some other rationale? That's exactly the sister. Because the Prophet ﷺ, he said that the aunt is in the position of a mother, and hence I don't know in the subcontinent, but in Syria, our aunt is our mother. I mean, I feel as comfortable going to my aunt's house and sitting with my aunt more so than with my aunt from my father's side.
This is your mother's sister.
That's what we're talking about, the mother's sister. Yeah, the mother's sister is as close to you. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, now in Arabic, the aunt has a name, and from Khala, and the aunt from the father's side is Amma. So when we say Amma and Khala, but in English, they call them the same, but in Arabic there is a differentiation. The Prophet ﷺ said, Al-Khala bimanzilati al-Um, it's her position, her status is the same like Al-Um. But he did not. Now there is a disappointment with Ali, and there is a disappointment with Zayd, right? So here is the beauty of the Prophet ﷺ. He did not leave them disappointed. He said, Al-Khala bimanzilat al-Um. Al-Khala is the same like a mother. You go with Ja'far. And he turned to Ali and he said to him, Anta minni wa ana mink. You are from me and I am from you. I mean, you are the closest to me. There are nobody else who is. So Ali felt good about it. He forgot that thing. And he would turn to Ja'far and he said, Ushbihta khuluqi wa khalqi. And they say that Ja'far radiallahu anh was in his facial complexion the closest to the Prophet ﷺ. He looked like him. And in his demeanor, in his behavior. And he told Ja'far that you look like me in your appearance and in your character. Now, rahimahullah, Ja'far did not last long. We, as I think later in the story, will see that he will die in Ghazwah Mu'tah. The next big battle is fought, and Ja'far will die fighting this battle, and he will die in such a heroic death that it is a story that is told over the ages. First, Zayd ibn Haritha was the leader of that campaign, and he was holding the banner, and he get killed. So Ja'far runs and he holds the banner, and he holds it with his right hand, and his right hand get cut, so he holds it with his left hand. His left hand get cut, so he holds it with his arms, and of course then he get killed. And as they are killed in Mu'tah, which is about 800 miles from Medina, the Prophet ﷺ announces in the Medina that the two of them died, and there was a mourning about them. Of course, a few days later the news came in. Now, who took care of the army after that? Khalid ibn al-Walid radiyallahu anhu. He took care of the army and he withdrew in a way that the army was saved. So he told Ja'far, Ashbahta or Ushbihta khalqi wa khuluqi. You are made to look like me in your physical appearance and in your character. And he turned to Zayd ibn Haritha and he told him, he said, you are anta akhuna wa maulana. You are our brother and our master. So you stay with us. Or maulana also could be interpreted as the one that belongs to us. You are our brother and you are the one who belongs to us. And as we just said, Zayd and Ja'far, both of them radiallahu anhum, died as shaheed. And so they are, as a matter of fact, Ja'far is known as one of the masters of shaheed in the Islamic tradition. And so we mentioned part of the reason that she is her aunt. And the aunt is in the position of a mother. But there is another reason. And that other reason is that she is the girl to Ja'far is a muhram. Because you're not allowed to have a sister and a sister. You're not allowed to have an aunt and her niece as wives. So if my wife's niece visits me, then she is a muhram to me. Meaning she can live in my house. She doesn't have to put hijab because I can't marry that girl. And that was another reason that he allowed muhram. So see how many religious ruling came from a small episode like this. And there is, as a result of this, basically in the Islamic law, in the countries that follows, that if there is a fight for the custody of a child between an aunt or the father side and an aunt from the mother side, it will go to the mother side. And there is that in terms of also inheritance, etc., etc. This is a ruling that is used. And all the madhahib follow this except Shaykh Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, who is not really, he had his madhab, but his madhab really disappeared. It is not present now, who chooses the aunt to be ahead of, the aunt from the al-amma to be ahead of al-khala. These are the events of this Umrah, and as you see, it is an interesting events, and it did not last long. It was 3 days that he left. He spent in Mecca, and I guess he talked to you about the letters that he sent to the different rulers and so on. So next, I think he will be talking about this Ghazwah that I kind of alluded to, Ghazwat Mu'tah. The background of the Ghazwah is that before the Prophet ﷺ, the Arabian Peninsula was completely ignored by the foreign powers. There were two major powers: the Persians on the east and the Romans on the west. And each of them had allies on the corners. The Persians had allies in the Yemen and Hadramaut. The Romans had allies more like toward the Syrian desert and in that area. And they, as long as they had in the Arabian Peninsula, there were many tribes and they were always fighting with each other, they did not bother. And that was the major trade route, bringing merchandise and goods from the east to the west. Anything that will come from the Spice Island, from India, from China, to go to Europe and to the Roman Empire, it has to go through the Arabian Peninsula. So what happens, they'll bring the ships, it will come to either to Yemen, which is Aden now, or it will go to Oman, which is on the other corner. They will load it on camels and they will take it through Mecca. رحلة الشتاء والصيف, that's what it is. It will go through Mecca, and from Mecca either it will go to Jeddah and then cross the Red Sea to Egypt, and then from there to Europe, or it will continue north to Damascus, from Damascus to Lebanon, the eastern coast, and from there it will go to the Roman Empire. Well, suddenly these Romans notice that there is a central government there taking shape. They hear of he told you, Bashar, about the event between Abu Sufyan and the leader of the Romans in Damascus. So they were aware of what's going on, and they knew about this new prophet, and they knew that many and more Arabic tribes are giving allegiance to him, and he is forming a strong central government. They didn't like that. So they started amassing their troops to go and get rid of him. The Prophet ﷺ, with his guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he was aware of this. So he wanted to hit them before they hit him. Hence the rationale for Ghazwah Mu'tah. Mu'tah is on the northern border of the Arabian desert and the Arabian Peninsula, and the Prophet ﷺ decided to get people ready and go to fight in that Ghazwah. And I think next week, inshallah, Bashar will go in details about this. He'll probably will talk to you about the Islam or the acceptance of Islam by two of the most important figures in the Islamic history, and those are Amr ibn al-As radiallahu anhu and Khalid ibn al-Walid radiallahu anhu. That's when they become Muslims, and the story of their Islam is a fascinating story. So inshallah next week he will go through it with you. Any questions or comments?
How many miles Musa is from Medina?
I want to say about probably 400 to 500 miles, something like that.
Traveling that time in the desert by 600 miles?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, between Mecca to Medina is 300 miles. And the Prophet ﷺ went through that journey on his feet. He will trade with Abu Bakr. One will ride, one will walk, one will ride, one will walk through that. Yeah. It's amazing. That was one of the reasons why the Muslim army was able to conquer the world in less than 100 years. Because you're talking about, they said that at that time a Muslim fighter can survive a day, one day, a complete day on a single date and a cup of milk, camel milk. That's it. He can survive on that. Compared to the Roman soldier who has to be, fed and has to be taken care of and so on. And so with this tremendous stamina and tremendous, the desert really shaped them to go out and spread that message. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put that message in them, because they were able to go through this austerity. And yes, because in those wars, the ratio of horse riders to those who are walking is less than maybe at the most 15%. Meaning for every 100 soldiers, 15 of them will be riding on horses and 85 will be walking. So you just walk all that distance, until you get there. Can you imagine just go out and walk for 1 second on your feet and see what will happen? They don't have blisters. They have feet that thick, probably, the skin. Who knows? But yes, that's a good point, and it is a few hundred miles, and they went there. Of course, the other Ghazwat that they were. Khalid ibn al-Walid radiallahu anhu, his story of moving the army. You see, because that will come maybe inshallah when we finish Seerah, we might talk about Al-Khulafa Al-Rashidin and their history and the history of the Islamic conquest. The army in Syria was meeting some resistance from the Romans and in trouble. So Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu sent order to Khalid ibn al-Walid to take part of the army in Iraq and go to help the fighters in Syria. And he crossed it's still the technical aspect of it is still being taught in the military academies, to how he crossed the desert from Iraq to Syria in a matter of 3 or 4 nights. And you're talking about the distance is probably roughly about 150 miles. And how could he arrive in a fighting condition with all those troops? Some people say that one of the tricks that he did, but it is not supported very much by many writers, that one of the tricks that he took his camels and he made them extremely thirsty for days and days and days, so they won't drink. And then he turned them onto the water and he let them drink as much as they want. And so meaning that they had almost, he used them as living trucks to move the water, and when they move, they get thirsty, they'll slaughter one of the camel and take the water. Allahu Alam, it is, I'm not sure how accurate that story, but it'll just tell you about his military genius, Khalid ibn al-Walid. Any other comment or questions?
To that, you did explain why
Not to my knowledge. Even when the Muslims, when they enter a land, they not in the history and in the teaching that they were taught by the leaders, the khulafa, they never forced Islam on the population. As a matter of fact, most of the historians will tell you that in the peak of the Umayyad dynasty lasted from probably year 40 of Hijrah up until year 120 or something like that. And in the peak, the total Muslim population of Syria, for example, was less than 15%. Most of them started accepting Islam later. As a matter of fact, one of the major arguments that there was a big argument between Umar ibn Abdul Aziz radiallahu anh and the house of Umayyah about how much to give the Muslims in terms and what kind of taxation system they have. And their argument is that even if you have a new Muslim, even if he is a Muslim, you don't tax him according to the Muslims that are from Arabia, because they wanted to become Muslim just to take benefit of the law. And he said, doesn't matter if it is a Muslim, it is a Muslim. The point is they became Muslim later by their choice. And if you have one of three situations, either you are a Muslim, you have a system, or if you are of Ahl al-Kitab, you have a system, or if you are what is known as a Dhummi, which means somebody will have a treaty with the Muslims that you will not interfere with the Islam and you will not practice your whatever religion in a public event, and you respect the Islamic faith. But there is not a known incident where Muslims came and said to a group of people, a nation, that either you become Muslims or we're going to slaughter all of you. And I will challenge anybody to bring a historical event like this. I don't see any. By the way, I did not go too much in the details because Ghazwah Mu'tah also has something to do that the Prophet ﷺ said a messenger to the Arabic tribes who were on the borders between the Roman Empire and the Arabian Peninsula, and who were siding, who were allies of the Romans, and that messenger was killed by one of those rulers. So there was a matter of also taking revenge for the messenger who was sent. But as you said, there is not a situation where they went in and they forced people, and most of those wars were defensive because the Persian succumbed and they accepted Islam by and large. Most of the people who inhabited the Persian Empire became Muslim. As a matter of fact, they contributed to the glory of Islam. As we know, when we talk about those personalities who really gave Islam a tremendous gift in terms of science, knowledge, etc. Many of them were non-Arab. Most of them were non-Arabs. When you talk about Al-Bukhari and Muslim, when you talk about Abu Hanifa, Al-Rumi and so on, they are non-Muslims. But the Romans, the Byzantine Empire, they never stopped. They kept fighting continuously and trying to come back and take back Syria. And so the Muslims had to fight, and that's where most of the wars were fought. The wars in the northeastern front was to protect the Muslims from the invasion of the nomadic tribes of the plains of Asia. And as we know later on, those nomadic tribes came in, and they are the ones who were very instrumental in destroying the Islamic civilization, yeah, but in Baghdad, yeah. Any other comments or questions?
In contrast to that, the Spanish Inquisition.
Okay.
You know, if you look how that.
Look at Jerusalem. Jerusalem, and as I said, inshallah, when we talk about the Khulafa, we'll mention this story again. When Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu entered Jerusalem, he gave what is known aman, meaning a pledge of safety to everybody, and there was not a drop of blood spilled in taking Jerusalem. And the famous story, I said this many times, when it is time for a prayer, he refused to pray in the church. He walked out and he prayed, and they indeed built a mosque where he prayed. It is known as Masjid Umar, and it is in Jerusalem. When the Crusaders came in, and this is from their writing, from the Western writing, not from the Eastern writing. When the Crusaders came in, they literally, the blood was knee high on the riders of the horses in the street of Jerusalem. They killed everybody who is not a Crusader, meaning a Muslim, a Jew, and an Eastern Christian. I mean, they killed. You know that the Pope, this recent Pope, just a couple, 2-3 years ago, he made a formal apology to the Orthodox Church for the atrocities that the Crusaders did in the name of that Pope at that time. But that whatever, he had the audacity not to make the apology to the Muslims about what the Crusaders did in the Muslim land and the slaughter and the atrocities they committed. When the Muslims entered Spain, the peak of the Islamic empire in Spain, 40% of the population was Christian, and they had their churches, and they had their businesses, and they had everything that they wanted to do. The highest peak of the Judaic civilization is under Islam in Spain, and they talk about it now when they talk about their philosophers, and they talk about their theologian and their biggest contributors to the Jewish faith. They talk about those who lived in Spain under the Islamic rule. There is not even a comparison between Islam and between the viciousness of the Western culture. I mean, now that they're going to tell us about how merciful they are. I mean, just 50 years ago, they slaughtered about no less than 40 million of their own in Europe, in the wars of Europe from 1900 to 1950. How many millions died in Europe because of their wars? So they are going to tell us. I mean, in entire the da'wah of Islam, in entire life of the Prophet ﷺ, who they call terrorist, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will know how to defend his Prophet. 2,000 people died in all these wars in 23 years of all parties. Less than 2,000 people. They're probably about 300 Muslims, 400 Muslims, and the others are mushriks. That's it. I mean, in all the wars and in all the conflicts and all so on. And when you count how many people died in the conquest, the way it happens, usually, an army will fight an army. Once the army loses, and then the Muslims will enter the land, they will keep things as they are. You own this land, you own this land. You will work it, you do what you want to, you pay your taxes according to the system that is in place. You own this house, you stay in this house. You own this business, you stay in it. Doesn't matter if you're a Christian or a Jew. This is not something I'm making up. I mean, it is all known in decrees that were given by Umar ibn al-Khattab, by Abu Bakr, by later on the other rulers. And not to mention that the most populous Islamic nations on the face of the earth now, there was not even any kind of military conflict. If you take Indonesia and if you take China, you know there are about 50 million Muslims in China. We don't hear that, but they are there now. They're trying to just eliminate them silently. It was on the hands of the Mercians who went there. Most of India also, it was not conquered by the force of sword at all. It was by people going there and having relationship. So, I mean, they know that. It's not that they don't know. They know that. But this is the excuse. They are scared to death of Islam because Islam is the one who will show their evilness. This country now is sinking in the lab of evil, in its behavior, in its arrogance. Instead of being thankful to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving them, they are being arrogant, just like Iblis. And Islam is telling them, don't do that. I mean, you saw what happened to the nations before you. You saw what happened to Ad, you saw what happened to Thamud, you saw what happened to the people of Nuh, to Pharaoh. I mean, how many times history has to repeat itself? And they don't want that voice. Because their churches, they don't preach that, they don't talk anything about that. Go to the churches on Sunday. It is nothing except social gathering and business exchange and having some production, so it will entertain people and suck their money to put it in the pockets of those big ones. And they don't want a voice of truth. And that's why, I mean, it's amazing. I mean, see, this guy, the Jamaican sniper, now his name is Muhammad. All the other names don't count. I mean, every day they repeat it 10,000 times, Muhammad, Muhammad. It is studies, you see, because they want to link his name. So every time you say Muhammad in the mind of people, it comes a sniper. Because they studied, they repeated so many times. Well, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept from us, and thank you for listening. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.